Oakley Show on 640 Toronto.
This is the John Oakley Show, and this is your guest host, I suppose, Ben Mulroney. Happy to be here. I was supposed to be on this morning, but my flight was canceled, and I began a cross-continental trek to get home in time to host this very show, and very happy to be here. But that also means that I was not able to stay up on top of the news as I typically am, because I was in transit. Fortunately, my next guest does that far better than I ever could. Let's welcome to the John Oakley Show, Jake Landau, liberal organizer, political analyst, and the author of Jake Landau is Getting Tired on Substack. Jake, very happy to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Ben. It's a great day for talk radio. You may not be John Oakley, but I'm happy to have you too.
Is that when I'm supposed to do the bell?
Probably.
Thank you.
Okay. You can be forgiven.
So Jake, from what I understand, you sat through the leaders' debate that just happened at 1 p.m. today.
Yes, most of it, yes.
Can you give me some high-level thoughts as to how it went, who stood out, what the key takeaways were?
It was very poorly moderated, and also all four of the candidates were very poorly prepared. It's the first time at a debate that I've seen people flipping pages of notes in front of them.
That's what I said. Jake, that's what I said.
I know. Well, I know it's the, and some people will say, oh, it's the Northern debate. I think the North deserves a bit more respect than that. I think it deserves your A game, especially if it's important enough for the leaders to be there. You should put your best face forward. You're going on TV for the first time.
Yeah, and
I do think Mike Schreiner gave it a bit of a better go, and I think it's because he's debated Doug Ford before, so he has a bit more of a feel for the game. Merritt and Bonnie, I was shocked at how similar they felt. And it goes along with how similar OLP and the Ontario NDP feel at this point. And also I was shocked a lot of the time they would stray away from the topic of the North, which is what the debate was supposed to be about.
And because they all had their binders, then that to me was like, I remember a time where at least for federal debates, you hear in the United States, no props. You can have a pen and a pad, and that's it. So you can take a few notes, but under no circumstances can you bring anything.
And it was weird because they would have a bit in it where like people would get their own dedicated time to speak, but also there was supposed to be some time where they could go back and forth. But it was the worst of both worlds because the moderator would say, okay, now quickly to you, but it would be in the middle of somebody else talking. So they couldn't naturally interrupt each other and made the interruptions even worse than if they're, it's not how I would host a debate, but I respect the fact that there was a debate for the North.
Yeah.
I just wish the North got more respect in it.
What besides what you just mentioned about the interruptions, what made it a poorly moderated debate?
Is just part of that was especially those inter segments where people would be yelling at each other, like there would be heckling. It felt more like question period than a televised debate, which I guess it's more accurate to what those politicians will actually be doing every day, but not sure it's what the Ontarian public actually wants in leadership. I think we want some, especially when we're concerned about Donald Trump, tossing the table and throwing all the chess pieces everywhere. I think we want a steady hand who feels calmer, more respectful. You get the idea.
Yeah. You mentioned that the Ontario Liberal Party and the Ontario NDP can sometimes can sometimes overlap. And I think we're seeing that in real time. There's a story that the Ontario NDP candidate Eglinton Lawrence is folding their campaign to help the Liberal opponent win. What do you make of something like that?
I have mixed feelings on it because, personally, I'm a liberal, but also I don't like the whole idea of strategic voting. I think that you should vote for whoever you like. I wrote a piece recently because Ontario has a per vote subsidy. Parties get a quarterly allowance for every vote they get. So there is even if you're in a place where somebody will win by 50 or 60%, there's a good reason to vote your conscience because but in general, I don't like the idea of people giving up a campaign to because they feel they can't win. Because if that's the case, why did you run? Why didn't you let the NDP in that community run a candidate who wanted to go to the finish line? Yeah. So, I mean, it'll benefit my party, I guess, but I don't feel great about it.
Yeah, to me, it feels a little like insider. A bunch of people got together in a closed room to make decisions that should have been left to the voter.
Right. And at a certain point, the Ontario NDP and the Ontario Liberals should be ideologically distinct if they're going to be two separate parties.
Yeah.
If they agree on so much that they think they shouldn't run in each other's areas, then maybe there needs to be a more official kind of agree. Right. And that doesn't necessarily mean a merger. In Australia, there are three parties. There's Labour, which is the left party, but then there's two right-wing parties. There are the Liberals there, who were like the BC Liberals, a right-wing party, but there's also the National Party. Yeah. And the Liberals and the National, they have an agreement to work together. It's just the Liberals there are popular in urban areas. The National are popular in rural areas. So it makes sense for them to not merge but cooperate. Yeah. I just think it shouldn't be an insider baseball thing. Like you said, it should be something that's up front. And if parties want to cooperate, they should do it above board.
I'm talking with Jake Landau, the author of Jake Landau is Getting Tired on Substack. We're talking about all manner of political stories. And I want to go to something that you wrote. The headline grabbed me, and I assume a little bit of his tongue in cheek, but I think it makes for a very good conversation. Doug Ford wants to murder his enemies.
A little bit tongue in cheek. Yeah. I don't think that Doug Ford is going to be walking around with a chainsaw and I do understand the argument that maybe it's a joke, but I don't think it's necessarily the best thing for a politician, especially an incumbent premier, to be joking about, especially when we do see south of the border that there is a lot of rumbling over whether the rule of law is still the rule of law.
Yeah.
It makes people uncomfortable. And like you, I'm opposed to the death penalty vehemently. There are a lot of reasons. One unique reason that I like to bring up is people, when it's not murder, but say the death penalty for rape or sexual assault, nobody really considers that if people know there's a death penalty, if they're caught, they might kill their victims to make sure they don't get caught.
Yeah.
That's just one reason. But
that's a very good point. Yeah.
And also, you can't unkill a person.
Yeah.
I think of the example of Reuben Hurricane Carter, the famous boxer, who was imprisoned for decades for a crime he did not commit. And he was freed in part due to the actions of a young man who lived in Toronto at the time. You can do watch the movie with Denzel Washington. It's very good.
It's a very good movie, but it is not an accurate reflection of what actually happened.
Read a book if you want, but also watch the movie if you like being entertained and you like Denzel as I do.
So Jake, I actually think I agree with pretty much everything you say, but I take a slightly different bent on it. That it's I think Doug Ford actually did himself a favor because he said something out loud that some of us, that a lot of decent people have thought to themselves in their own head, which is, where is the accountability in the criminal justice system? Where is the accountability? Where is the accountability for the fact that our streets are not as safe, that I don't feel as safe as a law-abiding citizen? And maybe if there was a little more accountability as far as sentencing goes, that these people would think twice before committing a crime. And I think he has this ability sometimes to say something. Yes, it sounded awkward. Yes, it was off color, but I guarantee you,
it sounds like something your uncle might say when you're at family dinner, and you're like,
and not the crazy
and
uncle.
That's what makes it relatable.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I think.
Yeah. And honestly, I don't necessarily disagree with you that a lot of people may agree in part with what he said. That doesn't necessarily mean it's right or that it's a good thing that a lot of people are feeling this way. But there is a very real situation in Canada where, not just in Ontario, but across the country, where there is a problem with how we deliver criminal justice. There aren't enough judges. There aren't enough prosecutors. So people get freed without going to trial because there was no speedy trial. There's a lot of underfunding of all the machinery that makes the criminal justice system work. Mind you, I think we need to respect the rights of the accused because they're the accused. They're not a criminal until they are convicted, if they are convicted.
Yep.
And that's my big thing. And especially the bar especially needs to be highest when you're talking about something as permanent as ending a life, or even something like life in prison. Because again, with Reuben Carter, he did get out eventually, but he lost a lot of his life over something he didn't do.
Yeah, no, I agree. Hey, don't go anywhere, Jack, because I'd like to, Jake, I'd like to keep this conversation going. And we've got some texts that we want to get to and a number of other stories. So don't go anywhere. I'm Ben Mulroney in for John Oakley.
This is the John Oakley Show on 640 Toronto.
The John Oakley Show on 640 Toronto with Ben Mulroney sitting in for John on this Friday. And I'm joined by Jake Landau, liberal organizer, political analyst, and the author of Jake Landau is Getting Tired on Substack. We're having a wide-ranging conversation about all sorts of political stories. And we got a text, Jake, from one of our listeners who said, Marit and Bonnie were awful, in my opinion. This is about the debate that just took place. Agree that Shiner did well today, but Doug was the most energetic. He had wanted it more, and despite the attacks that were expected, shot some back at Marit and Bonnie. If there was a disappointment, it was Bonnie Crombie. I thought she would be a lot better. What are your thoughts on Bonnie Crombie and her campaign, her first kick at the can?
Well, I think Bonnie might have a problem in front of her. She won the leadership for the Ontario Liberals on the premise that, we aren't going to need a long rebuilding process. I'm going to get us right back to government in one go. And now that it's very much looking like that not happen. Unless there's a significant shift in the race, the PCs look like they may even have a larger majority than they did previously. I saw one projection from John Michael McGrath, TVO, that potentially both the NDP and the Liberals could lose party status, which would... And I do think in a way the attacks against Doug Ford from all three of the other candidates helped Doug Ford because it made the debate about Doug Ford.
Yeah.
So whether or not you like or dislike Doug Ford, and I've got opinions about him, the debate was about him. People were thinking about him by the end of it. And it's different because, in 2015, Justin Trudeau would lob his attacks at Stephen Harper, but also he had his own vision for the country, for what he wanted his government to be and to do. He may not have followed through on all of it, but you get the idea. Yeah. And I think for Bonnie, I think the big problem is just that the main aspects of her policy just seem to be, we're going to act like conservatives, but for people who don't like Doug Ford. And the thing is, a lot of people do like Doug Ford. I don't know what this secret constituency of conservatives who don't like a popular conservative leader is supposed to be, but it doesn't seem to be working out for her.
What's the culture of the Ontario Liberal Party if a leader leads to a defeat? Do they have to go through a leadership review, or is it one and done typically, or is there more leash given?
It's usually one and done. Yeah. It's not like with the NDP where Andrea Horwath just kept going and going and going, and the same with Jagmeet Singh. They'll step down, but I say that with air quotes because they kind of have a good understanding, Liberal leaders, that because for better or for worse, these elections a lot are a popularity contest. Yeah. They're about who people like, and your likability doesn't change that much. You're kind of supposed to have that nailed down before you become a leader of a political party.
Well, let's shift our attention to the Liberal leadership race federally. And it's interesting to me that language has been this odd subplot through the whole thing when Chandra Arya said that he didn't need to speak French and that he spoke the language of business and Quebecers would respect that. Now, he's on the outside looking in. I don't believe we'll ever get a real answer as to what happened there. But now Ruby Dalla, who has positioned herself as a true outsider, who wants to come in and lead that party, she was asking for a translator at the upcoming leadership debate and was turned down. Now, I get that how important French is for any leader in this country, but we've had leaders in the past who didn't speak French. And she has committed to improving her French. So I wonder what you make of this decision to keep her from having a translator.
I don't think that she should have a translator, and I'm not very sympathetic to leadership candidates for any federal party who aren't good at French, just for the simple reason that a lot of the country lives in Quebec and lives in francophone parts of Ontario and Manitoba and New Brunswick. You get the idea. Yeah. It's just, I mean, look at the controversy with Mary Simon. Initially, I was like, of course, she grew up in the Indigenous day school system. She was forcibly oppressed by the state and not given the opportunity to learn French. I got that. I wish there had been more progress in the last 4 years, though, on learning French. And I don't think it's a very difficult language to learn. I was born in Toronto, but my family comes from Dollar Dormo in Montreal.
DDO. Yes.
It's a fun place. So you understand, we're West Island Jews. Yeah. So we're Montrealers, but English. Yeah. So, but I've been working a great deal on my French. I go to Quebec every other month on a train because I know the best practice is immersion and just throwing yourself into the deep end of the pool. But it is really important to me, just as a Canadian citizen, as someone who takes the integrity of our country seriously, that I should know both official languages. And I did write a piece on my Substack the other day about how we really do need to improve French language education in the rest of the country. So I think if you're going to be a leader of the party, you need to have French down before you make a run. You shouldn't be running for leader on a whim. It should be something you've at least thought about for a few years. And in a few years, you should make good progress on learning French.
Yeah, you know what? You make a very good point there. I mean, if Ruby had wanted to do this at some point, she could have been working on her French for years. She's been out of the public spotlight for a very long time now, and she could have spent some of that time taking Duolingo.
And I say the same thing with Christy Clark, who dropped out ostensibly over French, but also because she had been a Conservative Party member.
Yeah, that was so. My goodness. I mean, listen. I saw Chandra Arya say he didn't need to know French, and I said, "Well, that's the worst start to a leadership race I've ever seen." And then Christy Clark said, "Hold my beer."
Yeah. And what was crazy was when she was on that radio on the CBC, and she was like denying it was true. Yeah. And the person was like, "I have the evidence in front of me. The party sent me the membership roll," which, mind you, no party is usually supposed to send out their membership roster, especially not to journalists. Yeah. But in this case, it was very funny, so I can forgive it.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, before I let you go, there's this story that came out of AureliaMatters.com, and it's every year it feels like there's always somebody on the outside looking and complaining about proportional representation in our first past the post system and demanding some sort of shift towards proportional representation. This group says that our voting system is quote unquote rotten because the PCs took in the 2022 election, the Progressive Conservatives received 40% of the votes cast. They got 67% of the seats and consequently took over 100% of the government. That's the system that we have. And it just so happens that right now the PCs are riding high, but it could just as well be the Liberals next time around. Is it perfect? No, but it's the system we got. And I wonder what your thoughts were on this.
I'm I have mixed feelings. I don't like first past the post for obvious reasons, but I also think that proportional representation takes power away from individual physical communities and gives it to parties. And I think that political parties and party leaders and party whips have enough power as is. I don't think they need more. I like ranked ballots for this reason.
Yeah. I hope you have a wonderful long weekend. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ben. Hope you have a good one, too.
All right. Don't go anywhere. More on John Oakley with Ben Mulroney after the break.